Welcome to our virtual Classic 107 studio, Rod. You've been here before in person, and now you're talking to me virtually over Zoom. It's
Yes.
so great to see you.
Hi, Chris. It's great to see you again too. What an extraordinary time for all of us.
That's for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
So you sent me the electronic files for this new CD that you put out, and I was listening to it
Right.
all morning yesterday, and it is a great disc. I want to
Oh,
congratulate you on the CD. Yeah,
thank you, Chris. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
it's a beautiful disc. Maybe could you start out by maybe talking about sort of the inspiration behind the CD and how this project came about?
Absolutely. It was really twofold. It's kind of been an organic process in many ways. I've always been fascinated generally and curious about the songs. Generally speaking, what did they sound like? These were ancient songs, Chris, combining music and ancient sacred poetry. The Greek word, this is kind of interesting when I researched a little bit more about it as the project kind of took off. The Greek word for psalm actually defines as instrumental music, which I thought was interesting because what about the text, right? And more specifically, they said if you really dig a little deeper, the actual Greek definition is, I love this, the words accompanying the music. So as an instrumentalist, that was like a slam dunk, right? Like, I'm in, I want to do this. I thought it was really interesting that I'd like to try to write some music around this at some point in my life. I just, I didn't have it really scheduled per se at all. It was just kind of something almost like a bucket list at some point to toy with it. The thing about it that always intrigued me is the language is surprisingly raw for a sacred text. A lot of people know Psalm 23 and so on, and it's beautiful and it's very poetic, and it's a great psalm of trust after I looked into it. But there's a lot more content in the 150 psalms that are very raw and surprisingly edgy and earthy and very authentic to human experience. And as I dug in deeper, that's when I really started to wonder, what did these sound like? Because it was just hard for me to process what they would have sounded like. I mean, nowadays, the ones really that get angry, well, with Metallica around, then I could picture what that might sound like.
Yeah.
but this is often with these ancient stringed instruments. It was the poetry was accompanied by, so that was the wonder to me, right? On a more personal level, about 15 years ago, I developed writer's block. That would be the easiest definition of it. It was a pretty good, solid case of writer's block, and I couldn't play Chris for, oh boy, about 6 months. I'd get a headache as soon as I take my instrument out of the case. And now, for a professional musician, that's a pretty big problem. I could still teach, but as for my own practicing and performing, that it really just came to a screeching halt. And I had an old friend and mentor who kind of pointed me to the Psalms, ironically, and kind of as a vehicle to kind of express what I couldn't express. He had a background in counseling earlier in life, and so I think he was being creative with me. And then he took it a step further and encouraged me to then get on my guitar and to creatively express what I was feeling about what I was reading. So he had some methodology to what he was doing here. And what was amazing is it actually got me playing. I was reading, I'll mention a little bit about the psalm I was reading because it's the very first track that I wrote for this album. And this is 15 years ago. And it was Psalm 13. And Psalm 13 is a very short psalm, surprisingly short, but it's pretty loaded. It basically, at the start, it just says, how long, Lord, are you going to forget me? And are you going to just leave me to die, basically? And it was not in the physical sense, but emotionally. This person was dying, and the psalmist. And it was written by David, King David, third king of Israel. And then there's this weird shift towards the end where it says, and it seems out of context when you first read it. There's no question in my mind it was out of context. It says, but I will sing a song of praise for your love, which, again, just doesn't make sense when a minute ago he's saying, what, you're going to leave me in death? Thank you, And all the theologians, after doing some digging, the people that research this kind of stuff, they realized, because a lot of people thought it was belonging to the psalm after it. This is Psalm 13, so belonging to Psalm 14. But they realized that there was something there. They looked at the scripts and all the ancient manuscripts, and it was definitely part of Psalm 13. And what they realized is the psalm had discovered a profound concept that God was with him in the mess. And that was a big thing for me. And I wrote this psalm. It was weird. I'm pretty methodical with writing music. I've always been. And usually it takes weeks. You know, I'll have a theme come in my mind, and it'll take weeks for it to kind of, I think, process and become natural to me. And then harmonies will start to build, and ideas and options and so on. And it was like, you forgive the language, it's like I just barfed it up in 2 days. Just vomited this music up. It all came out. It took about 6 hours over 2 days, and it was there, and I recorded it just so I didn't lose it. And it hasn't changed since then. That was it. So those were the inspirations. Just a curiosity about them, and then my own experience with them.
So the album is tied together with this whole idea of Psalms. I mean, it's called the Psalms Project. Can you talk a little bit about how the Psalms relate to the actual titles of the tracks?
Yeah, absolutely. I know they're a bit mysterious, aren't they? They're used. I dug around a little bit. What I did, let me answer it this way. When I designed the album, I really love the therapeutic side of music, and I've always been intrigued by that. And this album, as you obviously just heard, was therapeutic for me in the beginning, you know, with the processing of the psalm and the music. And what I decided to do, because I want this to be relatable for everyone, you know, the Jewish faith, the Eastern and Western Christian faiths, you know, they read these psalms. This is part of their liturgy. But I want this for everybody who just likes music. And we're all also in such a crazy time. I'll talk a little bit more about the irony that this comes out now. I had no idea, of course. But I want this to be something for everyone, because it's really a 47-minute journey through human experience. That's really what I'd want people to see this album as. And when you listen to it, what do you see? What do you feel as a listener? And then the titles are clues. I picked synonyms for words that are more common, that are basically the word that best described the psalm to me as a whole. It wasn't a verse by verse rendering or anything like that. But basically, what was this saying about human experience, the things we go through, the highs and the lows, and the valleys and the mountaintops and so on. And I wanted the title to be a kind of almost a mysterious little clue as to what this is about, because I don't want to put what it's about in people's heads. And then there is, of course, by the title, as you would have seen when you're listening to it, Chris, there is the psalm reference beside it. So then people can go, if they'd like to, read the psalm and see actually the text and where I was going with it, you know?
Yeah.
So it's kind of, so in other words, it's kind of a fun project. This was a heart project over 15 years. I did it between the other albums. So it's been kind of a very long organic process, and I've had a lot of fun with it.
So, like, I'm just thinking, for example, I think there's a track on the CD called CJ All the Way. How do, like, it's these kind of titles that I'm sort of trying to figure out how they tie into the Psalms. Can you maybe talk about that? Maybe use that track as an example.
Yeah, for sure. You know what? I had a feeling you might ask about that, because that's the weirdest title. Now, this is an 11th hour title. Okay. Now, this is a very, very interesting story of a dear friend of mine, and I'll try to keep it really short. I haven't thought about the whole story in a little while, so I have to just make sure I'm articulate with this. So last summer, a dear friend of mine, her dad had heart surgery, and he's in his 80s, and it didn't go well. And he was basically in the ICU for the cardiac ICU for 2 months. And he wasn't expected to live. He had a 10% chance. And as my friend has said, you know, as she wrote me in a text, I love her language. She said, you know, at best my faith is sketchy. Like, you know, I'm not a religious person, blah, blah, blah. And she said, there was this crucifix on the wall in the hospital, and it was always crooked. And she said, you know, I'm a symmetrical gal. I don't like stuff like that. And she goes, the last thing that should be crooked is this crucifix. And she's really funny. And she said, so she ended up calling it Crooked Jesus.
Huh.
And then as we're going along, like we were texting as a family with her and her family over, you know, what was going on with her father. And she said, you know, it would get caught on the curtain and she'd be like getting mad at this thing. And then she said at one point, she all of a sudden felt that she could actually, and she grew up in a Catholic school. She said, I felt that I could actually approach Jesus on this problem because he was crooked. So he wasn't perfect, just like me. Like he was willing to come into this imperfect situation with this imperfect person and help me. And her dad did survive. And in her words, she contributes it. That's what she said to me. She contributed it to Crooked Jesus. And she said to me, then she had this little jingle, CJ all the way. She'd put that in text. So it was just a really funny and moving story, actually. And
then you have it next to Psalm 27.
Yeah. And Psalm.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Psalm 27 is a psalm written by David. And it's a psalm of trust, but if you read it, it's loaded with problems. It's got, I think there are 8 or 9 significant problems he's facing. And yet there's an air of confidence through the whole thing, which was actually quite uncharacteristic for David. He's the one that wrote Psalm 13. That was pretty dark. And here he's having an optimistic tone that, you know, God's going to get us through this. And so it reminded me so much of my friend's story. And I had no title for that one yet. And when she spun out this little jingle in only the witty way that she can, I thought, bingo, there's my title.
Nice. So where and when was the album recorded? Was it recorded during the pandemic? Like when did the recording process happen?
Yeah, you know, I recorded it, Chris, a year ago. It was April through June of 19. And then it sat for a year. There was actually, my wife had an emergency surgery in the fall, which was obviously very scary. And it just, everything kind of came to a standstill and we just got through the year. And then, through the fall rather. And then we started editing. So I do the recording at home. Sorry, I'm skipping a little bit. So it was a year ago, but I do the recording at home. I have my own studio here now. But I take all my footage, and the very talented Michael Dare in the city here, who's one of the best classical guitar producers in Canada, in my mind, by a long stretch. He did the work for me. We've done this is our 3rd album together, and he does all the editing and the production. And he's just such a talented guy. It's such a privilege to work with him. So yeah, so we did the editing between December and February. And just in the first week of February, when we're on the cusp of this whole pandemic, it was done. And so it was very, very bizarre to have it done at this time, you know?
Yeah. Which sort of takes me to the next question. I mean, are you planning on doing some performances of some of the songs off the album once we come out of the end of this thing? Like,
yeah,
sort of like a belated CD release party or something?
Yeah, absolutely. Like what I do these days, Chris, what I've done for a few years is I've been doing house concerts. That seems to be a great genre, you know, to get into now, is doing house concerts. You know, especially with classical guitar, it's a great setting, right?
Yeah.
So it works really well. And so I would plan on integrating them with a lot of interesting stories and so on into my other repertoire. Yeah, so that'd probably how to do it. And then also online, I probably doing some online performances might be looking, you know, with the way things are looking, that might be the best bet for the near future anyway.
Right. So the album is called The Psalm Project, Music for the Mess.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that title for a second?
Yeah, it's kind of a funny title, isn't it? It's a bit tongue-in-cheek for sure. I have a counselor friend who came up with it over dinner once. This is a few years ago. I was saying it's going to be the Psalms, and he was familiar with them. And I said, yeah, you know, they really describe just all the junk we go through. You know, I mean, they cover like everything from elation and joy to anxiety and stress and fear and depression and courage and confidence and anger. It just covers the whole bit, you know, everything we face in life. And there's, like I was saying at the very outset of our talk today is that there's a lot of raw language, a lot of real honest conversation going on in these things, these poems. So I thought, you know, calling it Music for the Mess is really perfect, because I did want it to be, like I was saying, a little bit almost therapeutic. This is music to go along with all the stuff we go through, like the highs and the lows and ups and the downs. Yeah.
Where can people pick up this beautiful CD?
Uh,
Where's it available?
Yeah, you know what? Because of the pandemic, we didn't press it yet. We have it streaming, and it's ready for download. So iTunes, Spotify, Apple Music, Google Play, all those, you know, all the main streamers.
Download sites.
And downloads. Yeah, yeah, all those, whatever you use. And if you don't have you know, you're not with Spotify, iTunes, it's there, and so forth. And then down the road, you know, we hope to press it, obviously. So, yeah.
So, do you have a projected time of when the pressing of the CD is going to be released, or?
You know what, we're kind of holding off just because of all the uncertainty, you know, what to know, when's the best time to really go ahead. I'm putting more eggs into streaming right now and playing online, I think, until things settle down, you know, and then the process will just take a month or two.
Right. So for those listeners out there, the name of the CD is The Psalm Project, Music for the Mess. It, like I say, I was listening to it yesterday morning, and it is a beautiful CD. It's very chill. And I mean, you don't get any more relaxing than classical guitar. It's just a fabulous CD, Rod.
I really deeply appreciate that, Chris. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a lyrical, poetic album for sure, obviously, with it being ancient poetry. There are a lot of those other emotions in there, and some virtuosic corners, if we can call it that, which made me really work, because I'm more of a lyrical player. So the music I wrote, boy, I have to practice to play it. But it is definitely meant to do just what you're saying, to calm, to refresh, and to renew. You know, and during this time, I just see it as a huge privilege. You know, no matter what a person's background is, you know, they don't have to be Jewish or of a Christian faith or anything. I hope the music does speak to them, and it does those things for them.
And it definitely does that. Rod, thanks so much. Thanks so much for talking to us today. It's been a real treat to see you again. And
yeah, you too, Chris.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's been a privilege. And thank you so much for your interest in the project.
Oh, thank you.